Alrighty, hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys basic code. We're gonna make a console game because we have the attention span of a goldfish, so it has to be a game. And I'm making this for beginners, so we're not gonna get into like 2D, 3D graphics for a while, so how fun. The first thing you're going to need to do is open your web browser. I don't care which one you use. Look up Visual Studio. Yeah, Visual Studio right here. Oh, I don't actually have it on screen. Yeah, we'll switch to this view here. Good start. Go to Visual Studio, and then you're gonna go ahead and you're going to download whichever one works for you. The community one is the free one, so I would suggest that, unless for some reason you have a better one. But if you have a better one, you probably aren't going to be watching this tutorial, so I would explain the installation process, but Microsoft can do it better. Just follow the instructions, install it, you're all good, and then once Visual Studio is installed, all you gotta do is open that bad boy, go ahead and hit create a new project, go ahead and look up console, and then you're going to... Oh, I meant to... Console, click on the one that has the C# box on it, and then boom, name it whatever you want, and then create, and it's gonna look different depending on the version of C# you're using. So this is where things get a little bit more complicated. A newer version, .NET 6, which you'd only get if you got the Visual Studio 2022 preview. Don't worry about what that is. We don't have to think about that right now. But technically, you don't need to format it like this anymore, but we're going to because that's how the majority of things are going to work right now. Okay, so now that I've gotten that out of the way, and you are asking, why is my phone being called? That's a good question. Let's deal with that. Okay, well, you know what they say, everything that can go wrong in programming will. So here's the reason I've taken so damn long to make a programming tutorial, because I wanted to be able to do it with fancy technology so that I could explain exactly what's going on, and here that is. I'm going to draw things out and make it very clear how things work. So if we go ahead and look at what we have right now, you'll notice we have two important things. Well, two statements pretty much. Public class program, and then public static void main string args. If you have no clue what any of this means, it's fine. Let's start at the beginning. A class. Okay, let's... it's gonna take me a while to get used to this, but we will get there. Let's see, is that way too thick? No, that's fine. So, a class is basically the idea of an object. The definition. So, for example, if I was talking about an apple, right? The concept of an apple is the class. For example, I know what an apple is. I can describe it. An apple is like shaped like this, kind of. That was an awful apple. It can be red. There's a lot of things about an apple that I know. However, is that idea of an apple an apple? No, it's the idea of an apple. An actual physical apple in your code would be an object. This is no longer just the idea of an apple. It is an actual instance of an apple. It's not just me going, hey, I'd like an apple. It's when someone throws a legitimate apple at me, I catch it in my hand and it exists. This is how classes work. Now, there are more concepts behind classes, but a class is defining a thing. It is not the thing itself, but it is defining it. Now, there is a thing where classes can be static, and what that means is that there is only one of it, so we do a little bit of a shortcut, and that class is also the object itself, because there's only one. For example, if there's only one... This is challenging, because there aren't a ton of good reasons to use static and like, well, there are good reasons, just not with what we're doing right now. But for example, if we had something, for example, the literal universe, right? If we're only going to have one universe, it's okay if we define it and have it also be the one instance. But that doesn't matter because we're not going to worry about this right now. I'm just being pedantic. Anyways, right now what we're going to focus on is the fact that a class is the idea. An object or an instance is the specific copy of that idea that actually exists. This is going to be a really important concept, so try to think about it. Alright, so now, public static void main args. This is a lot, but it's pretty simple. Let's talk about public, which you see is here as well. The idea of public is really simple. Let's say we have two classes, right? Remember, classes are just the idea of something. Pretty simple. Let's say we have a class that's a bean, and we have a class that is an egg. We have the definition of a bean and the definition of an egg. Well, let's say that we have an egg, so actually an object egg that exists, and we have a bean, an actual bean, not just the idea. Once again, these are classes. These are objects or instances. You can have multiple beans and you can have multiple eggs. They're defined above, but you can have many of them. Alright, so the idea of public is pretty damn simple. Public means that anything can access it. So, for example, if we have an egg and we have main, or let's do a different name for, I'm gonna have to make this a little bit bigger so that we can see inside of the eggs. I apologize, this is my first time doing this, so we're gonna, here we go. We got bean, we've got egg. And for example, what do eggs have? Eggs have yolk, right? So yolk will be one of the things that is defined in egg, and that means every egg, because it's the idea of an egg, every egg now has a yolk. Now, what if my bean wants to ask for the egg's yolk? Well, if we want to go ahead and access that, it's going to have to be public. If it is not public, then only the egg itself can access it. Now you may be asking, what is the purpose of preventing the bean from accessing the yolk of the egg? Perhaps there's things you just don't want people to touch, right? Maybe there's some internal logic inside of a class that should never be touched by anything except for things you've already written, and so you just want it to be private. Now you can explicitly state that it's private as well. Brilliant. But if we want things to be able to access it, we are going to make it public. This has to be public because, believe it or not, the main method here is being accessed by... Actually, I'm not sure if it has to be public for the main method. However, I mean, you're never technically going to really call... I'm pretty sure it does have to be public. We're just going to pretend it does. It's not going to hurt anything. Anyways, static, as I said before, means that there is only one. It doesn't make copies. So any copy of this class program are all going to point to this one main method. There's not going to be another copy of this method for each one, right? Got it? Simple. And there's only one main method because this is what gets run when the program starts. Beautiful. Brilliant. That's all cool. And if you're not, like, tracking any of this, it's fine because I'm going to be very repetitive. Very, very repetitive. Alright, void means that main returns nothing. Nada. Void. emptiness. Return is simple. Basically, when you call a method, it can return something, like an egg, or a number, or a letter, or text. I mean, if you could only call functions and they wouldn't actually ever return anything, it would be very hard to perform an action and then get a result. So, void means main returns nothing, which is fine. We don't need it to return anything because it's the main function. When it is done, the program closes. In other ways, sometimes people will return an integer to allow the program to know why it closed or if there was an error or something. We're not being that fancy, don't worry about it. Then we have a string array of arguments. Fun fact, when you go ahead and you go on Steam and add extra arguments to a game, or when you open something in the command line and do your dash whatever arguments, those go here. Brilliant. We'll talk about arrays and parameters in a second, but we're not gonna go over our head. What is a method? This entire block here. Methods do things. It's really that simple. If you want logic to be performed, you do it in a method. Methods can be called, they can be handed arguments, like this. And when they're done, they're just done. You can end them by going ahead and doing a return statement. For example, if I wrote return here, because it's void, we don't have to return anything, but boom, it ends here. Granted, you don't need to state return if it's just going to end anyways. And after a method is called, it'll go on to the next statement. So, let's actually do something now. Brilliant. We'll just do something very simple indeed. Go ahead and just write console dot writeLine hello world. See, this is the high quality stuff you're here for. Let's talk about this. So when we do this right here, console, you'll see it's green. If I hover over it, it'll say class system.console. This is a class console. I can do dot to access things inside of it. It's methods and properties and fields, and I'll explain all that at some point, but the dot means go into, get something from. We want to look within. So we get the console, we look within it, and then we ask for the method writeLine, which is a method, so it does something, and it writes a line, pretty simple. And then inside of these parentheses here, we go ahead and we give a parameter, which we're just doing a string, so we have the quotes around it. And if we hover over writeLine here, you will see that it expects a string value. The question mark means that it can be null, but we'll get into that later. I'm going to be saying that a lot because there's just so many tiny little things that you have to go over in programming. But get the class, call the method, pass in hello world. And now, if we just Control S save, hit play, we're gonna have, it's gonna say, hello world, look at that, we did it, this is so exciting. I need to switch screens, brilliant, can you see that? Hello world, very nice. Actually, I could have just went to this output here, I think. Really? I thought it would output it there. Maybe not. Alright, there we go. We have our beautiful output, and we're very happy about this. Alright, so next up, we're going to go ahead and talk about variables, because variables are important. It explains what this is, and we get a lot less spaghetti. Alright, a variable is basically a box that we define, that you're putting something in, and we have to say what we're putting in, right? So let's say I want text, right? This hello world here is a string, so it's kind of already defined. Same with, there's a lot of atomic types. So like, for example, the number 5, the number 5, that's what it is. Strings are a little bit more complicated than that. Different languages handle them differently, but a string is equal to the same string. There's no like copy of hello world that isn't the same as another hello world. If it is the same string, it is the same string, which is nice for a lot of reasons. But let's not talk about that. If we wanted this hello world to be somewhere else and then get written, we can go ahead and we can say string, we'll just say line equals hello world. This is an assignment, a very simple assignment, but here we are. We have a string that we are calling line. This can be whatever you want it to be, really. There's naming conventions, but you can, I believe if we really wanted to go there and be a horrible, horrible person, we could actually put an emoji in. Let's see, what is it? Windows key period now? Yeah. Oh, yes. I could legitimately... No, you can't. No. Oh, that's so sad. Some languages you can actually use Unicode. That's a little bit disappointing. Anyways, string line. So we're defining a string named line, and it is equal to hello world. So now instead of putting hello world in here, we can say console.writeLine line. And we know that line equals hello world, so it'll write hello world. Once again, we get this great output, exactly what we expected. And that's all very cool, isn't it? So, now that we've talked about that, things start to get a little bit fancier. Now that we know what variables are, let's talk about this right here. What is that? That means it's an array. Arrays are cool because I can have multiple of something. Rather than doing string line in string line 2 in string line 3 and giving myself a terrible hand pain from just writing way too much, I can do string lines. Now, a little bit of just trust me on this. When you make an array, it's a little bit more complicated because an array is technically an instance, so we need to actually use the keyword new. But boom! String lines equals new string. Why is it freaking out? Because we haven't defined the length of the array. Let's do like 3. Great. An array of strings, lines, equals new array of strings, where there's gonna be 3 of them. Now you can go ahead and do magic stuff like lines 0 equals hello world. You're going to set the string at the position 0 of lines to hello world, and you can do lines 1 equals hi there, and lines 2 equals Bob. Doesn't really matter what you do. You can make lines whatever you want them to be. But if we go ahead and we try to do lines 3, that's technically the 4th index, and it'll freak out and yell at us, so let's not do that. Arrays start at 0, deal with it. If your language has arrays starting at 1, it's not a real language, don't at me. Alright, so, now that we have these lines, that's really cool, you say, because it is. And let me even show you a slightly cooler thing you can do. Watch this. This seems like a lot of writing, because we still have to do this out each time. This is great if we want to access a single spot, but just defining these? No, that's gross. We can actually do new string array, and then inside of squiggly braces, we can actually just list them out, and it'll automatically size the array correctly as well for us. Now, isn't that clean? Now, this new string array is going to be set to a new string array that contains hello world. My name is Kobe. Very nice. Notice the commas separating out the different things we're sending in. Remember that you need quotes around your strings. The color coding should make it easy. There's a reason that things are all colored when you're programming. It's not because we like rainbows, it's because it makes it so that we know what we're doing. Consistency. Anyways, console.writeLine, we can do lines 0. And where do you think that's gonna go? Well, we can actually go ahead and do a little bit of a diagram here for if you're still having trouble with this concept. We have string lines. And if we do equals new string, let's say 3, what this is creating is it's creating an array called lines, and that array has 3 boxes in it, right? Because we've told it that it's going to be 3. This is the worst way ever to draw a grid, but whatever. So we have 0, 1, and 2, and we have the hello world. My name is Kobe. Because we defined it as 3, you will notice that there is 1, 2, 3. It matches. There is no 4th box here because it doesn't exist. That's bad. If you try to access something that doesn't exist, it's going to get very angry at you. It's going to throw an exception and you're going to cry. Don't do it. But you may be saying, Spike, well, now we have 3 lines, but I don't know, this is going to be pretty repetitive, isn't it? I have to go ahead and I have to copy and paste, and I have to do blah, blah, blah. And then if we go ahead and hit play, I mean, yeah, it works. Hello world, my name is Kobe. That's exactly the result we wanted. Oh, I can actually zoom this in so it's easier to see. Good. I'm gonna sneeze really quickly. There must be a better way to do this, right? There must be a better way. You're right, there is. Now I'm gonna teach you 2 ways. Because we get fancy syntactic sugar, which you don't know what that means probably, but that's fine because I'll say big words anyways. First off, the simple way to do this now. It used to have some performance implications, but it doesn't anymore, and we don't care about those anyways. Foreach. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like for each. I think we can kind of guess what it's going to do. The IDE is actually going to try to suggest to me, and I'm going to take its suggestion, string line in lines. This is crazy stuff right here. We're saying for each, so for every single string, which we're going to call line, in lines, which is right here. So for every single string line, which is this, this, and this, in lines, and it's going to suggest this, and I'm going to take its suggestion. You can just hit tab to take its suggestion. Console.writeLine line. Wow, would you look at that? Now you may be saying, well, it was 3 lines of code before, and now you have 4. Well, guess what? Technically, I can cheat and just remove these squiggly braces. Because any statement like this, if it doesn't have squiggly braces for things like if, for each, anything pink, really, if you don't have squiggly braces, it'll do the next line, which means the next thing until there's a semicolon. Fun. If I were to do this, only this would be run for each of these. This would not. So it's easier to just put the brackets in and just make it really clear. The things inside of the brackets will be run, right? Anyways, it's much simpler, and now if we add another thing, we don't have to worry about anything. Because if we add woohoo, it's still going to be covered by this for each string line and lines. It's going to console.writeline it, and it's going to be fantastic. Go ahead and hit play. We are going to have right here, hello world, my name is Kobe, woohoo. Look at that. This is great. Now, there's another way to do this. The old-fashioned way, which you're still going to have to use sometimes, because sometimes you want to know the number of things. That is when we get to basic for loops. For int I equals 0, I is less than lines dot length I plus plus. This is going to seem like pain and agony, but you're gonna have to trust me on this. I'm actually gonna split this to another video because we'll talk about loops more next time, all right? These are really simple concepts we have to get through before we mix them together. And I don't like droning on, but it's kind of necessary at this point. We're so early on, it's like learning what a verb is in English. But yes, it's very nice. At least we've written some code, we've gotten some things out, you've used at least a simple loop. We've talked about arrays, we've talked about methods, and we've talked about classes. So you know what? I'm gonna just clap and say congratulations. There's other things I probably should have mentioned, like the fact that each of the end of your statements you should have a semicolon. But if you forget it, you're gonna get a red squiggly right here, and it's going to literally tell you semicolon expected. So it's hard to miss. For things like methods and loops, you're gonna have brackets that contain everything. Yeah. Well, we'll go through. We'll go through. This is a good start. If this was utterly trash, let me know. But I think this was a good start. All right, got it. Brilliant. Very fun. Pog. We'll be back next time.